You're a future monarch. You've had a chance over more than 30 years now to observe our current monarch, the Queen.
A quiet horse show, a juice box, two children.
Bullying is an issue which can affect any one of us.
Prince William is standing up to bullying.
It is often stupid and cruel and can take many forms.
What started as an ordinary Sunday turned into a silent royal standoff that would shake the monarchy from the inside out. No headlines, no cameras, just one moment that changed everything. Why did Prince William draw a line no one expected? And how did a 9-year-old become the center of a decision that left even Queen Camilla reeling? It was a typical Sunday afternoon in the English countryside. A local horse show was underway. One of those community events that feels familiar to many. Families wandered from one area to another, stopping to watch young riders take on the jumps. There were muddy boots, dogs on leads, and cups of tea being served out of paper cups from temporary stands. Among the crowd that day was a group of familiar faces, members of the royal family. Prince William, Princess Catherine, and their daughter Princess Charlotte were among those attending. Their appearance wasn't published ahead of time. It wasn't an official engagement. They were there quietly, without fanfare or media, enjoying the event like any other family. It's not unusual for the royals to attend smaller community events, especially ones that involve horses. The family has a long-standing connection with equestrian culture, and Princess Charlotte is known to have an interest in riding, much like her great-grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II. That afternoon, Charlotte wore her riding boots and had her hair neatly tied back in a ponytail. She was seen holding a juice box, chatting softly, and occasionally clapping as young riders competed in the ring. People who were there described the atmosphere as relaxed. There were no formalities or bodyguards shadowing every move. William and Kate stood among the other parents, offering smiles and encouragement. Charlotte blended in with the other children, moving freely and appearing at ease. For many, it was a refreshing image, a young royal engaging in a normal childhood experience. But somewhere between the show ring and the food stall, the mood shifted. It wasn't a dramatic turn. There was no outburst or disruption to the event itself. Instead, what happened was subtle, quiet, and very human. Charlotte had been seated near another child, Lola Parker. Lola is the granddaughter of Queen Camilla through her son Tom Parker Bowles. While Lola doesn't hold a royal title, she's occasionally been seen at family gatherings and public celebrations. Due to her connection to Camilla, she has had some proximity to royal events, though she's not part of the core royal household. Those close to the family have previously described the relationship between Charlotte and Lola as polite but distant. They are close in age, but not particularly close friends. They've shared space at events, exchanged greetings, and smiled for photos, but never seem to have formed a strong bond. Witnesses at the horse show recall a moment when Charlotte noticed Lola watching her as she drank from her juice box. In a gesture many parents would encourage, Charlotte offered to share. She reportedly asked, "Do you want some?" And Lola said yes. Charlotte then added, "Just don't finish it. We're going to be here a long time and I'll need it later." There was no rudeness in her tone. It was a practical comment, the kind a child might make when trying to be fair. But when Charlotte turned back a few moments later, she realized the juice box was empty. Surprised, she asked, "Wait, did you finish it?" According to multiple accounts, Lola responded simply, "Yeah." Charlotte was confused. She reminded Lola she had asked her not to finish it. At that point, Lola reportedly looked at her and said, "You act like you're in charge of everything. Like you're the queen already, just like your mom." The words caught Charlotte off guard. She asked, "What do you mean?" But Lola didn't stop there. "She's not even queen," she continued. "My grandma is. Your mom's just pretending. Everyone sees it." Charlotte stood there holding the empty juice box, no longer speaking. But Lola went one step further. "And you're not special. One day they'll just marry you off and that'll be it. That's all you'll ever be." There was no yelling. No one around them raised their voice, but the tone had clearly shifted. The comments were not made in jest. Those who overheard described them as pointed, personal, and intentionally hurtful. Not the kind of teasing children sometimes exchange. but something deeper, a criticism shaped by adult ideas, possibly things overheard or passed down through family conversations. Charlotte didn't respond right away. She stood still, then turned and walked quickly toward her mother. Kate Middleton was nearby and instinctively knelt to comfort her daughter. She didn't ask questions or react outwardly, but people noticed her expression had changed. Witnesses described her posture becoming firm and protective, her face serious. She didn't make a scene. She didn't raise her voice, but there was a visible shift in energy, a mother recognizing her child had just been hurt. Prince William was only a few feet away, speaking with King Charles, when he noticed Charlotte's expression. He immediately ended the conversation and walked over. After quietly asking what had happened, he looked toward Lola and then at a few nearby adults. Without saying anything further, he took Charlotte's hand and walked away. No public statement was made, and there was no official response from Kensington Palace. But the tone at the horse show changed after that. Conversations grew quieter. People looked down or away. It wasn't dramatic, but it was noticeable. Something had happened, and those who were there could feel it. For the royal family, who are often criticized for being emotionally distant or overly scripted, this moment offered a glimpse into something deeply personal. A young girl, not a title, not a symbol, but a child, had experienced a moment of cruelty. Her parents didn't respond with outrage or spectacle, but their actions were clear. They stood beside her. While some may view the interaction as a small childhood disagreement, those who saw it unfold sensed that it represented something larger, perhaps a reflection of long-standing tensions within the extended royal circle, or a reminder that even within seemingly polite environments, power dynamics can play out in subtle and painful ways. While the public remained largely unaware at first, the atmosphere behind palace walls began to shift. William, usually measured and reserved in his responses, wasn't simply brushing the moment aside. He was processing it not as a future king, but as a father who had seen his daughter hurt in a very personal way. And for someone who has spent most of his life under scrutiny, that meant making careful, deliberate decisions. 1 week after the incident, Prince William made an unusual move. He posted a short message on Twitter. It wasn't written on official royal letterhead. It didn't include a formal crest or a photograph. There were no names mentioned, but the tone was unmistakable. It read, "My family will always come first. Anyone who thinks they can harm my daughter and remain close to us is mistaken." The message was direct, personal, and rare. Royal family members, especially senior ones, don't typically use social media to make statements like this. It wasn't the kind of language people expected from William, but it was clear he meant every word. The reaction online was immediate. Many people supported his statement, praising him for standing up for his daughter. Some called it one of the most human things he'd ever done publicly. Hashtags like Team Charlotte and Protect the Princess began trending. It didn't take long for people to connect the dots. Although no names were mentioned in the tweet, royal watchers quickly linked the message to the events at the horse show. As more details began to emerge, the story gained traction. A few unnamed sources close to the palace confirmed there had been a confrontation involving Princess Charlotte and a member of Camilla's family. Soon, the media dubbed it the horse show incident. It wasn't just the story of a child being upset. It became a broader conversation about the role of non-royal relatives, boundaries within the royal family, and what happens when personal relationships cross invisible lines. Internally, William didn't waste time. According to palace aides, he held a private meeting with senior staff where he made a firm decision. Lola Parker, Camilla's granddaughter, would no longer be allowed access to private royal events. That meant no invitations to family garden parties, no spots at royal gatherings, and no passes into secure areas typically reserved for close relatives. The message wasn't made public, but people noticed. When Lola's name was left off the guest list for an upcoming event at Windsor, reporters began asking questions. When she wasn't seen accompanying Camilla to a charity appearance a few days later, the speculation grew stronger. The silence from the palace only added fuel to the story. Support for William's decision continued to grow online. Many parents weighed in, saying that if their own child had been spoken to that way, they would have done the same, if not more. Others pointed to the pressure that young royals are already under, especially children like Charlotte, who live in the public eye from such a young age. For them, this wasn't about drama or family politics. It was about protecting a child who hadn't asked for the spotlight but was born into it. Of course, not everyone agreed. Some commenters felt the response was too harsh. "One rude moment and she's banned from everything?" one user asked. Others questioned whether a quiet conversation between the families might have been enough. Some speculated that the tweet itself might have been a form of strategic communication, a way to reset the narrative and remind people who really holds the power in the royal family. But what seemed to resonate most wasn't the punishment itself, it was the principle behind it. A child had been hurt, and instead of ignoring it or covering it up, her parents had taken it seriously. That action, while subtle in royal terms, felt like a statement, not just from William, but from a modern family navigating life inside one of the world's most traditional institutions. The attention also brought renewed focus on how Kate Middleton has been treated over the years. Long before this incident, she had been the subject of ongoing media criticism. Some called her too perfect, others claimed she was too private or too controlled. The stories changed from week to week. One moment she was too distant from Meghan Markle, the next she was being criticized for how she dressed or how strictly she parented. Even as she rarely responded publicly to these stories, the pressure had clearly been building. Then came the resurfacing of old holiday photos, private images of Kate and her sister Pippa taken without their consent while they were on vacation. They were published widely, often with little regard for privacy. At the time, Prince William had been furious. But again, there was only so much he could do. The criticism didn't stop there. More recently, stories had begun to question Kate's parenting style. Some claimed she was too strict. Others said she kept her children too sheltered from the world. One article even suggested that the Cambridge children had few real friends, and that Kate and William were raising them in a bubble. But to many parents, the idea of protecting one's children from the pressures of public life didn't seem unusual. It seemed reasonable. Now, with the horse show incident bringing their daughter into the spotlight, William and Kate had reached a turning point. This wasn't just about responding to one child's comment. It was about standing up against a pattern of behavior, one that had chipped away at their family's sense of peace for years. Behind the scenes, William reportedly stayed up late the night after the tweet, meeting with his closest advisors at Kensington Palace. He wasn't angry in the way some expected. He didn't shout or make threats. Instead, he reviewed documents, read reports, and asked questions. When he learned that nothing had yet been done about Lola's future access, he gave a clear order. No more invitations. No more exceptions. There was no press release. No interviews. But the impact of the decision was unmistakable. Lola had been quietly removed from royal events. And for those paying close attention, the message was crystal clear. The inner circle had just gotten smaller, and the boundaries had become sharper. This wasn't just about enforcing rules. It was about protecting something deeper: trust, family, and the well-being of a child. And in the days that followed, more and more people began to see it that way. Whether they agreed with the way it was handled or not, many understood the reasoning behind it. While no public statement had been made, it didn't take long for the decision to become clear. People noticed Lola's absence from an upcoming family event at Windsor. Reporters noted that she wasn't by Camilla's side at a recent charity visit, something that had become common during low-profile royal appearances. For those familiar with the inner workings of the royal household, these small absences spoke volumes. Camilla was reportedly furious. According to palace insiders, she didn't see the situation as a simple disciplinary matter. To her, it was deeply personal. She had worked hard over the years to integrate her family into the royal framework, carefully rebuilding her public image and balancing her role as queen consort with her responsibilities as a grandmother. From her point of view, Lola's removal wasn't just about one child's mistake. It was a rejection of her family. Those close to Camilla say she reacted strongly when she found out. She paced around her private quarters, slamming doors and repeating the same line: "They've crossed a line." Her frustration wasn't only directed at Prince William. She felt blindsided by how easily her granddaughter had been cut off from the royal circle, without discussion, without warning, and without what she saw as a fair chance to respond. Camilla's first move was to go directly to King Charles. In private, she argued that the punishment was too harsh. She acknowledged that children say things they shouldn't, even hurtful things, but insisted that the response had been overly emotional. She asked for the decision to be reconsidered, perhaps even quietly reversed. But Charles, who had been recovering from a recent health episode and was dealing with ongoing responsibilities of state, wasn't interested in reopening the matter. According to aides who were present, he barely looked up from the papers in front of him. His response was brief. "It's been handled." That sentence hit Camilla hard. It wasn't just the words. It was the tone. Charles wasn't angry, but he was finished with the conversation. He didn't challenge William's decision, and he didn't invite further discussion. For Camilla, that lack of support was painful. After everything she had done to remain a steady presence within the monarchy, she now found herself on the outside of a family decision that cut deeply. Behind closed doors, Camilla began to shift her focus. She didn't escalate things publicly, but she did begin to voice her frustration more frequently. In conversations with friends and trusted aides, she pointed to Kate Middleton as someone who had played the situation perfectly. Too perfectly, in her view. Camilla believed Kate had taken advantage of the moment, using her silence and calm demeanor to win public favor. "She's not innocent," Camilla was overheard saying to someone close. "She knows exactly what she's doing." Camilla reportedly felt that Kate had allowed public sympathy to build without lifting a finger, offering no quotes, no interviews, not even a statement to ease the situation. She saw it as calculated. To Camilla, it looked like Kate was winning not just the public's support, but also quiet influence within the palace. But not everyone agreed with Camilla's interpretation. Kate had indeed remained silent, both in public and in private. Her first appearance after the incident was a scheduled visit to a children's hospital. There were no changes made to the agenda. No questions were allowed from the press. She was photographed holding Charlotte's hand, guiding her gently through the crowd of reporters. The image spread quickly, but the gesture was simple, maternal, steady, and quiet. While Camilla felt her influence shrinking, the public reaction told a different story. People weren't interested in hearing that a grandmother was upset about a revoked invitation. They were still thinking about the image of Charlotte, tearful at a family event, being comforted by her mother. That image had already been shared widely across social media and picked up by news outlets. For many, it had come to represent something more, the vulnerability of a child in the public eye, and the strength of a family willing to stand behind her. Inside the palace, Camilla began pushing back in other ways. She held a series of private meetings with aides, trying to rally support or at least find someone willing to help her smooth things over. She made subtle references to the incident during meetings, occasionally dropping hints that the matter could still be resolved. But what she found instead was silence. People listened politely, nodded where necessary, and then moved on. The quiet support she had once enjoyed, the soft influence that came with years of navigating royal politics, seemed to have disappeared. She continued to bring up the topic with King Charles in private, hoping to change his mind over time. During walks, at meals, even through offhand remarks passed via staff, she circled back to the issue. But Charles, still focused on his health and official duties, gave no sign of changing his position. At one point, Camilla even told her personal team that she was considering stepping away from some public duties. She cited health concerns and stress. Her press team began preparing soft messaging in case she did decide to pause her schedule. Friendly reporters were tested with quiet mentions of exhaustion and family pressure. But the reaction was underwhelming. The public didn't rally behind her. The story didn't catch fire. People had already formed their opinions, and many didn't see Camilla as the victim. The mood had shifted. This time, sympathy was with Charlotte and her parents. What had once been a subtle power dynamic within the royal family was now more visible, and Camilla was feeling its weight. Meanwhile, Kate continued with her public duties without change. She offered no comment, posted no social media statements, and did not engage with reporters on the subject. Her approach remained consistent. Let others talk, while she continued doing her job. The lack of reaction itself became a kind of response, one that many interpreted as composed and deliberate. Camilla, however, wasn't done. As her efforts inside the palace stalled, she turned to the media. Within weeks, small stories began to appear in various outlets. Some painted Lola as a well-mannered child caught in an unfortunate misunderstanding. Others suggested that the royal family was experiencing a quiet rift. Initially, the tone of these pieces was soft, but over time they grew sharper, hinting at internal disagreements and strained relationships. William didn't respond publicly. Those close to him say he hoped that by staying silent, the tension would pass. But inside the palace, the pressure continued. Camilla wasn't just pushing for her granddaughter. She was fighting to preserve her place in the story, to ensure that her family didn't get pushed to the side. Inside the palace, Prince William continued to keep his public stance measured. He didn't elaborate on his earlier tweet, and there were no follow-up comments from him or Princess Kate. But behind closed doors, the matter was far from settled. What had begun as an emotional decision was becoming something deeper, a personal turning point in how William saw his role not only as a father, but as a future king. One of the clearest signs of this shift came during a meeting focused on King Charles's health. Though still actively working, the king's energy had become less predictable. Treatments and medical follow-ups were now part of the routine, and the burden of long-term planning had begun to shift more heavily toward William. During a routine conversation with senior aides, the subject turned to family appearances and ceremonial roles. That's when William made a comment that surprised those present. He said plainly that when the time came for the crown to pass, Camilla would have no official role in the vision he was building for the monarchy's future. Not in title, not in function, and not in family memory. He reportedly added, "She replaced my mother once, but she won't replace her in memory." It was a short sentence, spoken without anger, but those in the room understood its weight immediately. William wasn't just drawing a boundary around his immediate family. He was redrawing the story of who belonged in the royal legacy and who didn't. There was no discussion, no debate. Those present took note, recognizing that this wasn't a statement made out of anger or in the heat of the moment. It was a conclusion he had arrived at slowly, over time, and the horse show incident had only accelerated it. A few days later, William took another step, this time within his own household. He sat down with his children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, not as a senior royal, but simply as a father. He explained things in a way they could understand. According to a source close to the family, he told them gently that Camilla was no longer to be referred to as their grandmother. "She doesn't act like one," he reportedly said. "She doesn't deserve the name." It wasn't about cruelty or punishment, it was about clarity. He reminded them that they already had a grandmother, Diana, and that her memory was theirs to keep and honor. For the children, it may have been a confusing conversation, but it was one that William felt was necessary. The implications of that conversation were more symbolic than procedural, but they reflected a broader decision taking shape inside the palace. Quietly, Camilla's place in future royal traditions was being reevaluated. While she remained queen consort by title, she was being phased out of other areas, removed from certain family portraits, left out of private planning sessions, and no longer spoken of in conversations around legacy and heritage. There was no official removal, no press briefing. Palace aides referred to it privately as the invisible removal, a gradual, silent adjustment that would shape how the monarchy moved forward. Camilla would continue to fulfill ceremonial duties alongside Charles, but her long-term presence within the emotional core of the family, especially the next generation, had been severed. Meanwhile, public interest in the story remained high. As reports circulated that Camilla was struggling to re-establish influence, reactions varied. Some sympathized with her, seeing her as someone unfairly caught in a family dispute, but others viewed it differently, as the natural outcome of years of strained relations, media management, and unresolved history. When images of Charlotte quietly walking with Kate appeared again in the press, they were met with overwhelming support. Charlotte, once just another royal child in the public eye, had now become a symbol to many, not of scandal, but of resilience. Her silence during the incident, followed by her calm presence in public, resonated with people. It wasn't about drama, it was about dignity. Still, Camilla wasn't ready to let go of the matter. Though her influence within the palace had diminished, she looked outward, toward the media. Over the following weeks, stories began appearing in a range of publications. They didn't mention Charlotte directly, but they hinted at friction within the family. Some painted Lola as a child unfairly targeted. Others suggested William's decision had caused division. The tone of these stories was subtle at first, but became more pointed over time. They didn't accuse, but they implied. They didn't blame, but they questioned. Yet the public response wasn't what Camilla might have hoped for. The support she once relied on from the press wasn't as strong as it had been. The narrative had changed. William chose not to respond to these stories. He gave no further statements and continued with his royal duties as usual. But behind the scenes, he remained firm. Aides confirmed that Lola's exclusion from family events would remain in place. There would be no reinstatement, no quiet reversal. For Camilla, the silence from Charles was even more difficult to accept than the decision itself. He remained mostly out of the discussion, focused on his health and responsibilities. He didn't side with her. He didn't defend her position. His approach was to keep moving forward, which left Camilla feeling more isolated than ever. The loss of informal support inside the palace became increasingly clear. Her suggestions were no longer eagerly taken up. Her invitations received fewer responses. The people who once helped manage her image were now more cautious. Even the tone of her public appearances had changed. There were fewer smiles, more stiffness, and a noticeable absence of warmth in her interactions. At one point, Camilla reportedly told her staff that she was considering scaling back her schedule. She cited health reasons, but those close to her understood that it was as much about frustration and loss of influence as anything else. Her press team tested the waters with sympathetic pieces, but the reaction was muted. The public, still remembering the image of a young girl holding her mother's hand at the horse show, wasn't ready to shift the narrative. Even people who rarely commented on royal affairs found themselves taking sides, not because of politics or status, but because of something simpler. They believed a child shouldn't be made to feel small, especially not in a space that's supposed to be safe. For William, this chapter became a defining moment in his leadership. He hadn't made his choice out of impulse or image. He had acted out of principle, for his daughter, for his wife, and for the kind of monarchy he hoped to shape in the future. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about asserting dominance. It was about protection, about legacy, and about refusing to let old power structures and personal history override what matters most, the people at the center of it all. Camilla still holds the title of Queen Consort. She still walks beside Charles at official events. But within the heart of William's family, and in the image of the monarchy he is preparing to lead, her chapter is already drawing to a quiet close. In the years to come, when the story of this moment is told, it won't be about scandal. It will be about boundaries, about memory, and about a future king who, when it mattered most, chose to protect his own.